Most people relax with a book or a beer. Americans? They relax by ironing shirts on cliffs, collecting roadkill, or yelling at worms in the dirt. We've dug up 49 hobbies that prove boredom is a dangerous thing in the US. These aren't just pastimes, they are expensive cries for help and borderline insanity. Let's see how weird your neighbors really are. 1. Most people view gardening as a peaceful way to grow a few tomatoes and maybe avoid talking to their spouse for an hour. But then you have the maniacs involved in extreme topiary. This isn't just trimming a hedge, it is about torturing a boxwood bush until it looks like a life-size velociraptor or a scale model of the USS Enterprise. It requires the patience of a saint and the steady hands of a neurosurgeon, all to create a green monster that will absolutely terrify the mailman when he walks up the driveway. While your neighbors are struggling to keep a single geranium alive, these folks are out there with shears, turning their front lawn into a surrealist botanical nightmare. It's impressive, sure, but it also screams, I have way too much time and a very tolerant homeowners association. 2. We have all heard of extreme ironing on cliff edges, but there is a domestic American version that is infinitely more stressful. Picture this. You are trying to press a crisp crease into a dress shirt while your toddler is simultaneously destroying the living room with a marker and a bowl of spaghetti. That is the sport. It is a high-stakes game of wrinkle management amidst absolute domestic anarchy. It requires a level of focus usually reserved for bomb disposal experts. These people aren't just doing laundry, they are battling the laws of entropy in real time. If they manage to finish a shirt without a sauce stain or a nervous breakdown, they frankly deserve a gold medal and a stiff drink. It's less of a hobby and more of a cry for help. 3. In a world where you can send a message across the globe in a millisecond, some Americans are intentionally choosing the speed of a snail. The letter-writing society crowd has decided to reject modernity in favor of fountain pens, expensive parchment, and actual wax seals. They look like they are LARPing as 18th century aristocrats sending a declaration of war, but usually they are just telling a pen pal about their cat's vet appointment. It is a rebellion against the instant gratification culture, sure, but it is also an incredibly expensive way to communicate. By the time you receive their letter, the news is 3 weeks old, and the ink has probably smeared. But hey, at least it looks classy while you struggle to read their cursive handwriting. 4. If you think the sound of a lawnmower on a Saturday morning is the soundtrack of hell, prepare yourself for lawnmower orchestras. Yes, this is real, and yes, it happens at festivals across the flyover states. Imagine a conductor waving a baton not at a string section, but at a dozen guys sitting on John Deeres. They rev the engines to specific pitches to create a wall of mechanical noise that vaguely resembles a melody if you squint your ears hard enough. It is less Beethoven and more carbon monoxide poisoning set to a rhythm. You have to admire the sheer American ingenuity of turning yardwork equipment into a musical instrument, even if the concert smells like gasoline and leaves everyone partially deaf. 5. Forget the crude stick figures you drew on the driveway as a kid. American sidewalk chalk artists have turned pavement doodling into a mind-bending profession. We are talking about massive, hyper-realistic 3D chasms that look like the street has opened up to swallow you whole. You walk down the block and suddenly feel like you are about to fall into a shark tank or step onto an alien landscape. It is dazzling, perception-altering art that takes hours of backbreaking labor on rough concrete. And the most tragic part? It is entirely temporary. One heavy rainstorm or a guy with a power washer, and that masterpiece becomes a colorful puddle in the gutter. It is a harsh lesson in letting go, drawn in dusty pastel. 6. For normal people, thrift shopping is about finding a bargain on something wearable. But for a specific breed of American collector, the goal is to find the absolute worst garment ever manufactured, the ugly Christmas sweater. They aren't doing it ironically anymore. This is a lifestyle. The hunt is on for sweaters with battery-operated lights, 3D felt reindeer, and enough glitter to blind a pilot. The gaudier and tackier, the better. Their closets in December look like a holiday decoration factory exploded and fused with a polyester nightmare. They wear these itchy, sweating monstrosities like armor, challenging anyone to question their taste. It is a dazzling assault on fashion, and honestly, you have to respect the commitment to looking ridiculous. 7. Skipping a stone across a lake is usually a relaxing way to kill time, but for a specific breed of American physicist-athlete, it is a serious sport. We are talking about guys like Kurt Steiner, who holds the record for making a rock skip 88 times on the water. They don't just find a flat rock, they scour riverbeds for the perfect hydrodynamic stone, treating it like a sacred artifact. They study angles, velocity, and spin rates with the intensity of a NASA engineer. It takes a simple childhood joy and turns it into a high-pressure quest for the laws of physics, all to make a splash that lasts 10 seconds. 8. Stamp collecting is for people who like quiet, organized lives. True connoisseurs of American nostalgia are out there dumpster diving through history to find menus from long-dead fast food empires. Unearthing a mint condition, grease-free menu from a defunct chain like Burger Bliss Barn is their version of finding the Holy Grail. It is a greasy portal back to an era when prices were low and nobody cared about cholesterol. These collectors frame laminate sheets that used to hold lists of 99-cent burgers, treating them like historical documents. It is archaeology for the deep-fried soul. It's weird, it's incredibly specific, and it makes you hungry for food that hasn't existed since 1997. 9. Why bother taking a perfectly good elevator that whisks you to the top floor in 30 seconds when you can simulate a near-death experience in a dusty stairwell? That is the logic behind tower running, a sport where highly conditioned masochists race up the stairs of America's tallest skyscrapers. We are talking about thousands of steps, burning lungs, and legs that turn into jelly around the 40th floor. It is a brutal test of endurance that takes place in a concrete tube with no ventilation. The prize for reaching the top is usually a nice view. But let's be honest, most of these runners are too busy trying not to pass out to appreciate the skyline. It is the only sport where the playing field is a fire escape. 10. Forget the quiet dignity of fly fishing on a mist-covered lake. Some Americans have elevated angling to a ridiculous battle of wits known as squirrel fishing. Picture a grown adult standing in their backyard, armed with a fishing rod, a line, and a strategically tied peanut. They aren't trying to eat the squirrel. They are locked in a tense standoff with a rodent that regularly outsmarts traffic. The goal is to lift the squirrel slightly off the ground before it lets go, a catch-and-confuse strategy that serves absolutely no purpose other than entertainment. It is a strange way to spend an afternoon, proving that humans will turn literally any interaction with nature into a competitive sport, even if the opponent is a tree rat. 11. You don't need a hunting license or even a pond full of actual birds to appreciate the art of competitive duck calling. In the US, there are people who treat quacking like it is an opera performance. Highly skilled callers stand on stage, far away from any actual waterfowl, and meticulously replicate the feeding calls and mating sounds of various duck species. Judges rate them on pitch, realism, and pure championship-level duckiness. It is a symphony of simulated fowl, where grown men blow into wooden whistles until they turn purple. It is incredibly impressive if you close your eyes, but if you open them, you just see a guy in camouflage making noises that would confuse a mallard. 12. Theme parks are for the masses who like safety inspections and insurance policies. Real American ingenuity involves building a fully functional roller coaster in your own backyard using lumber, salvaged metal, and a prayer. We are talking about homemade thrill rides that make professional engineers break out in a cold sweat. These backyard builders construct drops, loops, and turns that weave through their flower beds and over the patio furniture. It is pure daredevil DIY, driven by the desire to scream at high speeds without paying admission prices. The neighbors probably hate the noise, and the local zoning board is definitely having a panic attack, but you have to respect the commitment to terrifying your friends on a budget. 13. Hot dog eating contests get all the glory on the 4th of July. But there is a far more slippery and disturbing pursuit in the American competitive eating scene: butter eating. Yes, this is real. People willingly sit down and consume entire sticks of pure, salted butter as if it were a banana. The sheer caloric audacity is breathtaking. Or maybe that is just their arteries screaming for mercy. It is less of a sport and more of a lubricated slide into a medical emergency. Watching someone unwrap a stick of dairy and take a bite is a visceral horror that you can't look away from. It takes unhealthy eating and turns it into a spectator sport that will haunt your nightmares. 14. While most antique shoppers are looking for a nice vase or a vintage lamp, a special kind of American enthusiast is out there scouring dusty shelves for the creepiest dolls imaginable. They don't want the cute ones. They want the ones that look like they are plotting a murder. Their homes are filled with shelves of tiny glassy-eyed figures with cracked porcelain faces and Victorian dresses that smell like mothballs and ghosts. These collectors actively seek out the haunted aesthetic, surrounding themselves with hundreds of unblinking eyes. It is a hobby that guarantees you will never sleep comfortably again. But apparently, the thrill of wondering if your collection moved while you were in the bathroom is worth it. 15. Most of us look up at the sky and just see the weather, but members of the Cloud Appreciation Society see a high-stakes gallery of art. These dedicated cloud spotters meticulously identify and photograph formations with the enthusiasm of a kid in a candy store. They find deep drama in a lenticular cloud and get genuinely emotional about a cumulonimbus. It sounds like the most passive hobby on Earth, essentially staring at water vapor, but they take it very seriously. It is a wholesome rebellion against the busy world, proving that you can find entertainment anywhere if your standards are specific enough. They are the only people who get excited when a sunny day is ruined by overcast skies. 16. In the heat of summer, when there is no snow to be found, some Americans turn to the noble art of ice blocking. This involves buying a massive block of ice from the grocery store, sitting on it with a towel, and hurling yourself down a grassy hill. It is cold, it is wet, and it is surprisingly fast. It is basically sledding for people who don't mind a frozen backside and permanent grass stains on their jeans. Friction is the enemy here, and the result is usually a chaotic slide that ends in a mud puddle. It is a brilliant low-tech way to beat the heat, provided you have good health insurance and a high tolerance for looking ridiculous in a public park. 17. The humble rubber band ball starts as a way to tidy up a desk, but for some Americans it becomes a life's work. We are talking about massive, dense spheres that weigh hundreds of pounds and have taken decades to construct. These people meticulously add layer after layer, stealing office supplies one elastic loop at a time, until they have a bouncing boulder in their garage. It is a testament to extreme patience and an impressive waste of stationery. You have to wonder what the end game is. Do you roll it down a hill? Do you leave it in your will? It sits there, a colorful, heavy monument to boredom and repetitive motion. 18. The digital age moves so fast that yesterday's iPhone is already trash, but vintage computer enthusiasts are running in the opposite direction. These Americans hunt down, restore, and cherish the clunky beige bricks of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They spend hours listening to the screech of a dial-up modem, or the grind of a floppy disk drive, trying to load a game that consists of 4 pixels. It is about preserving a rapidly vanishing technological history, sure, but it is also about the masochistic joy of using a machine that has less processing power than a modern toaster. The boot-up sounds alone are enough to send them into a nostalgic trance, while the rest of us are just glad we don't have to use MS-DOS anymore. 19. While most people buy alarm systems to keep burglars out, a community of Americans practices lock sport, the art of recreational lockpicking. These folks sit around picking handcuffs, padlocks, and high-security door mechanisms for fun, timing themselves to see how fast they can crack a safe. It is technically legal, provided you own the lock, but it is a hobby that definitely makes your neighbors nervous. There is something unsettling about watching a guy open a master lock with a paperclip in 3 seconds flat. It turns breaking and entering into a puzzle game, which is cool, but maybe don't brag about it on a first date. 20. For some Americans, the board games of the modern era are too polished and sensical. They prefer the vintage board game scene, specifically hunting for the weirdest, most culturally outdated relics from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We are talking about mint-condition copies of Mystery Date, where you open a plastic door to find a cardboard boyfriend who looks like a serial killer, or the McDonald's game, which teaches children the joy of fast food capitalism. These collectors revel in the smell of old cardboard and the hilariously bad graphics. It is a museum of bad ideas and questionable social norms, preserved in a box. They aren't playing for fun. They are playing to experience the sheer cringe of a bygone era. 21. If you ever look at a river and think, this needs more plastic, you will love the American tradition of the charity rubber duck race. Imagine a dump truck unloading thousands of bright yellow, sunglass-wearing rubber ducks into a waterway, creating a bobbing, artificial armada. Each duck has a number, and the owner of the first one to float across the finish line wins a prize. It is a slow-motion race where the athletes have no legs, no brains, and rely entirely on the current. Watching a sea of yellow drift aimlessly while grown adults scream encouragement from the muddy banks is a surreal spectacle that really makes you question our priorities as a species. 22. You have heard of hunting, but have you heard of worm grunting? In parts of the American South, this is a legitimate competitive sport. Contestants drive a wooden stake into the ground and rub it with a heavy iron bar to create vibrations that drive earthworms to the surface in a panic. It is technically fiddling for worms. Hundreds of people gather to see who can annoy the most invertebrates out of the soil in a set time. It is a bizarre mix of biology and rhythm, proving that Americans will turn literally anything into a competition, even harvesting bait. 23. Jack-o'-lanterns used to be simple, 2 triangle eyes and a snaggletooth grin. But the American competitive pumpkin carving scene has turned vegetable surgery into high art. These people aren't using kitchen knives. They are using clay sculpting tools and scalpels to turn a gourd into a photorealistic portrait of Morgan Freeman or a complex fantasy battle scene. The level of detail is mind-blowing, involving shaving layers of rind to play with light and shadow. The tragedy, of course, is that these masterpieces are perishable. You spend 40 hours carving a masterpiece and 3 days later, it is a slumped, moldy pile of mush on the porch. It is the definition of fleeting glory. 24. Live action. Roleplay, or LARPing, usually conjures images of wizards and warriors hitting each other with foam swords. But American creativity has pushed this into the realm of the absurd. There are groups that roleplay not as heroes, but as rival factions of unionized garden gnomes, or survivors of a glitter-based fashion apocalypse. We are talking about grown adults spending their weekends arguing over mushroom zoning laws while wearing pointy red hats. The commitment to these hilariously specific, bizarre characters is terrifyingly impressive. They treat the ridiculous lore with absolute seriousness, creating a form of aggressive whimsy that is both confusing and strangely inspiring. 25. Do you remember Big Mouth Billy Bass, the animatronic singing fish that annoyed everyone in the late 90s? Well, for some Americans, that wasn't a gag gift. It was the start of a lifestyle. There are collectors who hoard these plastic monstrosities, hunting for rare variants that sing different tunes. Some tech-savvy obsessives even hack the circuitry to make the fish speak with the voice of Alexa or sing death metal. Imagine walking into a room and being greeted by a synchronized choir of 50 mounted bass, turning their heads in unison to sing "Take Me to the River." It is a wall of battery-operated purgatory that proves nostalgia can sometimes go too far. 26. Souvenir spoons are usually the domain of polite elderly ladies, but there is a darker, weirder version of this hobby. Some Americans are on a cross-country quest to collect a spoon from every state. But with a twist, the spoon must depict a local cryptid or legendary monster. They are driving through West Virginia looking for a Mothman teaspoon or scouring the Pine Barrens for a utensil featuring the Jersey Devil. It turns a boring travel collection into a hunt for silverware with a body count. Eating your morning cereal with a spoon that commemorates a terrifying swamp beast is a very specific kind of power move. 27. A scarecrow is supposed to keep birds away from the corn, but in American scarecrow building contests, the goal seems to be traumatizing the neighbors. Farmers and hobbyists create elaborate, often nightmarish dioramas that go way beyond a stuffed shirt on a stick. We are talking about zombie scarecrows, alien invasion scarecrows, and scenes that look like they were rejected from a horror movie set. It is folk art with a distinctly dark agricultural twist. You drive past a field expecting to see crops, and instead, you see a straw-filled reenactment of a slasher film. It definitely keeps the crows away, mostly because the crows are too terrified to fly over the county line. 28. Fishing typically requires patience, bait, and a desire to relax. Magnet fishing requires a rope, a high-powered neodymium magnet, and a tetanus shot. Enthusiasts toss strong magnets into murky canals and rivers, not to catch fish, but to pull up submerged scrap metal. They are hunting for treasure, which usually turns out to be rusty shopping carts, old car parts, and the occasional murder weapon thrown off a bridge. It is basically underwater dumpster diving. They clean up the waterways, sure, but mostly they just fill their garages with corroded junk that smells like swamp water and regret. 29. Mountain climbing is impressive, but high pointing is a geographically obsessive quest to stand on the highest natural point of every single state. Sure, climbing Denali in Alaska is a heroic feat of survival. But then you have to drive to Florida, where the highest point is Britton Hill, a bump in the ground that is lower than some skyscrapers. High pointers treat that flat patch of dirt with the same reverence as Everest. It is a checklist hobby that forces you to visit the most remote, boring, and flat corners of the country just to say, "I stood on the slightly elevated dirt." 30. Most rational human beings see a tornado warning and hide in the basement. But for American storm chasers, that is the signal to load up the truck and drive directly into the danger zone. This isn't just watching the Weather Channel. It is an extreme hobby involving armored vehicles, portable Doppler radars, and a total lack of self-preservation. They hunt supercells across the Great Plains, looking for that perfect, terrifying shot of a twister touching down. It is a mix of science, adrenaline addiction, and a desire to see nature destroy things up close. It's the only hobby where success involves nearly getting blown off the map. 31. If you think martial arts are too grounded in reality, there is the flourishing American scene of lightsaber combat. This isn't just kids swinging plastic toys. These are adults using durable, illuminated polycarbonate replicas to engage in full-contact duels. They have developed complex forms and rule sets, treating the weapon of a Jedi with the seriousness of a samurai sword. It is a mix of fencing, stage combat, and intense nerddom. Watching two guys in protective gear trying to whack each other with glowing neon sticks in a community center gym is a beautiful collision of fantasy and sweat. It's glorious, neon-soaked violence. 32. Why flip a light switch with your finger when you can spend 6 months building a machine to do it for you? The construction of Rube Goldberg machines is a beloved hobby for the mechanically minded and wonderfully patient. These Americans build room-sized contraptions involving dominoes, rolling marbles, toaster springs, and maybe a startled cat, all to perform a simple task like wiping a napkin or popping a balloon. The charm lies in the inefficiency. It is an engineering degree used for comedic evil. If one domino falls the wrong way, the whole thing fails, which is probably a great metaphor for life, but much more annoying to reset. 33. While some people collect muscle cars for the roar of the engine, a quiet group of Americans is captivated by the hum of antique electric fans. These collectors hunt down cast-iron, heavy-duty fans from the early 20th century. You know, the ones with the open metal cages that were basically finger guillotines. They meticulously restore the motors and polish the brass blades, appreciating the industrial design and the wind tunnel level of breeze they generate. Their homes are filled with the gentle, rhythmic whir of dangerous appliances. It is a cool hobby, literally, but you definitely want to keep your hands in your pockets when you visit their house. 34. Man's best friend meets the ocean in the undeniably delightful hobby of dog surfing. This isn't just a one-off YouTube video. There are actual competitions on the California coast. Talented canines, often sporting tiny life vests and sunglasses, shred the waves while their humans cheer, like over-enthusiastic soccer moms. The dogs usually look either stoic or mildly confused about why the ground is moving, but they balance surprisingly well. Judges score them on the size of the wave, length of the ride, and overall doggo stoke. It is the only sport where the athlete is paid exclusively in treats and belly rubs, which frankly is how all professional sports should work. 35. You might think rock, paper, scissors is just a simple way to decide who takes out the trash, but bless your heart, you are wrong. In the US, there are surprisingly intense leagues for this hand-to-hand combat of wits. We are talking about grown adults engaging in stare-downs that would make a professional boxer sweat, all before throwing paper to beat rock. There are signature moves, deep psychological warfare, and actual cash prizes on the line. It is a sport distilled down to 3 hand gestures and pure intimidation. If you think this is just random chance, you clearly haven't seen a pro analyze their opponent's twitching eyebrow before delivering a crushing scissors victory. It is the most intense action you can have without actually moving your feet. 36. Competitive eating usually involves hot dogs, but there is a darker, crunchier side to the sport that avoids standard food entirely. We are talking about contests centered on eating exotic items like live insects, scorpions, or even Rocky Mountain oysters. Don't ask. It sounds like a challenge from a budget reality show, but these are real events at local festivals. Brave, or perhaps just deeply confused participants, shovel crickets into their mouths while a crowd watches in a mix of horror and fascination. I don't know what prize makes eating a bowl of larvae worth it, but I hope it includes free therapy and a stomach pump. 37. Forget your artisanal charcuterie boards with expensive cheese. A dedicated group of Americans is keeping the terrifying art of the Jell-O mold alive. They treat gelatin like a medium for high art, creating elaborate, multi-layered towers that wobble threateningly on the plate. While fruit is acceptable, the true diehards venture into the savory zone, suspending vegetables, shrimp, and even hot dogs in a lime green prison. It is a culinary flashback to the 1950s, where apparently nobody had taste buds. These wobbly, translucent sculptures look less like food and more like alien specimens in a lab jar. But you have to admire the structural engineering involved in making meat float. 38. For most of us, a coupon is something we forget in a drawer. But for the extreme couponers, saving 50 cents is a blood sport. These people are terrifyingly organized, armed with industrial-sized binders and a knowledge of store policies that rivals a contract lawyer. They don't just shop, they raid. They walk out of a grocery store with 3 carts full of deodorant and pasta, and the cashier ends up owing them money. Their basements look like doomsday bunkers, stocked for the apocalypse, filled with enough detergent to wash every shirt in the hemisphere. It is an impressive display of math and logistics, but honestly, what are you going to do with 400 tubes of toothpaste? 39. Graffiti is illegal and messy, which is why the wholesome rebels of America have turned to yarn bombing. This involves knitting custom-fit sweaters for inanimate objects like fire hydrants, parking meters, and lampposts. You walk down a gritty city street and suddenly see a bike rack wearing a colorful wool cozy. Is it a protest? Is it a secret code? Or is it just someone with too much free time and a deep concern that the public infrastructure is getting cold? It is vandalism that you can cuddle. It's charming, sure, but it also raises the question of why a cast iron pipe needs a scarf more than the pedestrians do. 40. Some people collect coins, others collect bottled pain. The hot sauce collecting community consists of enthusiasts who fill their pantries with sauces ranging from mildly spicy to active volcano. They aren't buying these for the flavor. They are buying them for the terrifying labels in the Scoville units. Their shelves look like a hazardous materials storage locker, filled with bottles named Satan's Blood or Gut Wrencher. It is a curated museum of capsaicin designed to destroy your digestive tract. Most of these bottles will never be opened, because let's be honest, nobody actually wants to eat lava on their tacos. It's just a flex to show you own a weaponized condiment. 41. Horse racing is the sport of kings, but ostrich racing is the sport of lunatics. In certain parts of the US, brave or incredibly foolish jockeys climb onto the backs of these 8-foot-tall dinosaurs to race around a dirt track. The ostrich is a bird with a brain the size of a walnut and a temper to match, so the race is usually 10% running and 90% the bird trying to throw the rider into the fence. It is pure slapstick comedy masquerading as a sport. The birds run in the wrong direction, peck at the officials, and generally cause chaos. Betting on this is basically throwing your money into a shredder, but the entertainment value is absolute gold. 42. Country clubs require collared shirts and hefty membership fees, which is why the rebels of the fairway have invented urban golf. The entire city becomes the course. Participants tee off in gritty alleyways, chip shots over parked sedans, and try to sink putts into storm drains. It requires a unique blend of golfing skill and the ability to run away when you accidentally dent a minivan. It is a guerrilla sport that turns the concrete jungle into a playground, although I imagine the local police have a different name for it. It brings the gentleman's game to the streets, usually involving cheap beer and a lot of apologizing to bewildered pedestrians. 43. In an era where everyone has a high-definition camera in their pocket, some Americans are intentionally downgrading. Lomography is the cult of using cheap, plastic toy cameras from the 90s to take photos. They love the light leaks, the blurry focus, and the oversaturated colors that make everything look like a fever dream. Flaws aren't mistakes. They are features and aesthetic choices. It is the photography equivalent of listening to music on a scratched vinyl record because it sounds warmer. They spend a fortune developing film just to get a picture that looks like it was taken by a toddler with a disposable Kodak. But hey, apparently that is art now. 44. Most rational people see a sinkhole as a terrifying reminder that the Earth can swallow us whole at any moment. But for a niche group of American geology enthusiasts, a giant hole in the ground is a destination. These sinkhole tourists actively track geological data and travel to visit the sites where the ground just gave up. They stand at the edge of a chasm that ate a Corvette dealership and nod appreciatively at the soil erosion. It is extreme sightseeing for people who find the Grand Canyon too stable. It takes a special kind of curiosity to run towards a geological disaster zone, hoping to get a good look at the abyss before it stares back. 45. Move over Michelangelo, because the medium of the future is apparently Irish Spring. Soap carving is a genuine hobby where people take a bar of drugstore soap and whittle it into intricate flowers, busts, or animals. It requires a delicate touch because one wrong move, and your masterpiece loses a nose. The result is art that looks delicate and smells fantastic, although it is completely useless for actual washing. Imagine having a guest use your hand-carved swan to wash their hands. The horror. It is a fleeting art form, destined to either gather dust on a shelf or slowly dissolve down the drain, leaving nothing but a clean scent behind. 46. While most of us try not to trip over them, a specific breed of American hobbyist sees manhole covers as cast-iron masterpieces. They scour cities to find unique, artistic, or historic covers and create paper rubbings of the designs, cataloging the urban infrastructure like its ancient hieroglyphics. It is like historical brass rubbing, but with a much higher chance of getting hit by a taxi or yelled at by a sewer worker. They are down on their knees in the middle of the street, scribbling with charcoal, trying to preserve the beauty of a lid that covers human waste. It is a dirty job, but I guess someone has to appreciate the heavy metal art beneath our feet. 47. Picking up sea glass is a charming activity for grandmas on vacation. But pirate glass hunters, have elevated this to a frantic obsession. They aren't looking for the common white or green shards. They are hunting for black glass, thick, dark olive shards from 17th century rum bottles. They only go out after major storms on specific, treacherous coastlines, battling the waves to find a piece of trash thrown overboard by a drunk sailor 300 years ago. It is history hunting one wave-tumbled artifact at a time. They can spot a piece of pirate glass from 20 yards away in the dark. It is a romantic way to say you collect broken liquor bottles. 48. Rail fanning is the American answer to train spotting, but with more aggressive telephoto lenses. These folks spend their weekends standing on weed-choked embankments, waiting for hours just to photograph a specific diesel locomotive driving by. They meticulously log engine numbers and schedules, getting genuinely emotional about the paint scheme on a freight car. To the outsider, a train is just a loud inconvenience, but to a rail fan, catching a rare vintage engine is like seeing a unicorn. The dedication to detail is immense, and their knowledge of railway logistics is frankly terrifying. They know more about the cargo schedules than the actual conductors do. 49. Traditional taxidermy is about preserving nature as it was. Rogue taxidermy is about playing God with glue and fur. This American art form involves taking parts from different animals and stitching them together to create mythological beasts or nightmares. We are talking about squirrels with wings, rabbits with antlers, or rats dressed in tiny Victorian outfits. It is where biology meets a fever dream. These artists look at a dead animal and think, you know what this raccoon needs? A monocle and a robot arm. It creates pure, wait, what? Moments for anyone visiting their house, and it certainly ensures that their estate sale will be confusing. Well, now you know that somewhere, right now, a grown man is professionally mooing at a crowd. If your hobby isn't slightly terrifying, are you even living? Tell me in the comments, which of these people needs the most therapy? Be specific, I read everything. Hit like if you feel normal by comparison, and subscribe before the algorithm assumes you're into competitive soap carving.